Donald Trump declares himself king after striking down New York congestion pricing. This just backs up my findings in my Donald Trump book that Donald Trump could easily be the Antichrist. Now, Donald Trump declares himself king just days after suggesting he is above the law. So he said here, he who saves his country does not violate any law. So this is endorsing his apparent belief that the President of the United States is incapable of breaking any law, and the Antichrist is the man of lawlessness. Days after suggesting he is above the law, Donald Trump declared himself king following his administration's push to strike down new tolls for Manhattan drivers to raise funds for the city's aging mass transit system. Congestion pricing is dead, he wrote on Truth Social on Wednesday. Manhattan and all of New York is saved. Long live the king. Many people have compared Donald Trump with Elvis, the king of rock and roll, but we'll save that for another video. But Trump has put on Truth Social, long live the king, referring to himself. We know Jesus Christ is the King of Kings, that the Antichrist is going to precede the second coming of Christ and claim to be God and demand to be worshipped. The White House's X account then shared the statement with a mock cover of Time magazine featuring a portrait of the president wearing a crown with the caption, "Long live the king." Guys, Donald Trump, I've shown you that Donald means world ruler.
I don't know if I have to be that close to it.
We can go to this verse here, 1 Corinthians 15:52.
When you wake up,
in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the
I'm weaker
shall
right
sound,
now
and
than
the
you've
dead
ever
shall be
been.
raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. 7 trumpets, guys. You're going to read about them in the book of Revelation.
You've never been as awake as I
Now,
am right now.
if we look here, look what RFK Jr. said about Donald Trump.
Right. I'm so awake.
Right? God sent me President Trump, whom he called a man on a white horse. Revelation 6:2, and I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown
what's a hot take this week?
given
What's a hot take?
unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. That verse is about the Antichrist. It's the first seal of the 7 seals. Like 17. QAnon, Q, the 17th letter of the alphabet. This is incredible, guys. Again, if you've not purchased my Donald Trump book, do it today. And when you watch a video like this, it's just going to make you go, wow, it's all adding up. Trump, the 47th US president, the first 4 of the 7 seals are the 4 horsemen. The world is wondering after the beast, Donald Trump, whose presidential car is called the Beast. So this is short, this is sweet, and it once again shows you that we're very likely living out the end of days, because the Antichrist reveals himself in Revelation, guys, the final book of the Bible. And Donald Trump, again, the man of lawlessness, which is the Antichrist. Going back to this here. He who saves his country does not violate any law. This is the man of lawlessness. Incredible stuff. It really is. Please like and share this with as many people as you can on every platform that you're on. Get this information out there, because Donald Trump is deceiving billions of people. Take care. Please like and share. God wins.
Sleepy Justin. Oh, look, he's awake. He's actually streaming now. He's not AFK in the Discord like he was when I joined. Uh-huh. I worked like 3 or 4 12-hour days this week, but I slept in today, so I woke up at like 4 yesterday, and I worked from 5:15 in the morning till 5:30 at night, and then I couldn't go to bed. So we're doing a little better today. Like Wednesday night? Last night. Oh, okay, yeah. You came home in the what? Mhm. Mm. No cheese. Well, I'm about to roll. That's awesome. That's good. I feel good that like I actually slept for once this week. So it's crazy what a difference that makes. I'm probably gonna go to Weiss and the beer store. Can I get you anything? Okay, is Jared there?
Yes.
Would you like anything besides you said Gatorade and those 2 chunky? What are they?
Just the chicken pot pie like soup thingies.
I think they're called chunky. I don't know why that's what I call them, but I know what you're talking about. Just those?
Yeah.
You want some Guinness or something?
No.
Okay. Sam got a spicy pork ramen. I told him you might want to try some, but it is spicy. And then I just got like a second beef ramen for you and Mom to share.
Okay.
So you said you wanted to try some. She wasn't sure what you wanted. That's what I got.
Okay.
But while that's going, I'm gonna go pick up your food.
Okay. Woohoo.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at like working all of this, ordering food, going to get stuff for sick people who don't work, other than Destiny.
I work the most, if that's the case. Yes, thank you.
Dude, you basically work 2 full-time jobs at the same time,
That's what
right?
I'm saying.
Like he has RuneScape going in the background, Justin, while he like. Do you know what Mechanical Turk is, Jared?
No.
It's this thing. I think it's still around, but like it was really big back in the day, like 15 or so years ago. It's basically this Amazon platform where you say, "I need people to do this small menial task," and it's a way for people to like get paid per task. So like think about labeling images for AI training or something like that, but like anything like that. Translation's a good example. You should just do that while you're like freaking playing RuneScape anyway.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just needs it.
I mean, the prices are probably not so like the pay is probably not so great these days, but I'm curious. The one thing before I got this job, the one thing that I was looking at was there's like a pay. It's like a consulting thing. They pay you as a software developer to rate AI outputs. Like it'll give you the prompt and what the AI responded, and you'll basically grade it with explanation. Yes, but like there's a couple tests that you take before you get in it, and then like it's also partially like your performance is partially evaluated on like how well you're evaluating them. So like if you just say like yes it's correct, like that's not enough, right? Like they're looking for a little bit more than that. Like yes it's correct and it's a good answer because blank blank and blank, or like yes it's mostly correct but it's going to miss these couple of edge cases, right? Like that's what they're really trying to drill
Before the
into.
establishment of the Roman Orthodox
And then
Church,
farm you for better training
dating back
data to then pass back in and
to the 1st century
can I
AD,
get you anything at
the
Weiss, Justin?
Gnostics were a sect of Christians with a very different
want,
set of beliefs from what the new blossoming religion of Christianity would soon
You want some more
become.
Arizona hard iced tea
The
is what I heard?
Gnostics insisted they were in fact the
Oh my god. How about a Guinness? Wait, which one did you drink? It was just green. Wait, what was the other one then? Lemon green tea? Oh, yeah. No, green tea with just vodka in it does not sound like something that I would. What is? Don't they like? What is? Is it like a hot toddy or something? They put like rum in tea? Am I crazy? Yeah. Well, that's what all those are, like the wine coolers and stuff. Hmm. But like even the wine coolers, like Seagram's Escapes, they're all malt beverages these days. Uh, I mean, I probably can't drink them anymore. I stopped drinking them a long time ago when I figured out that not only is there no nutritional information on the bottles, on the packaging, you can't find any on their website either. And I was like, that's enough for me. I don't really need to know what's in these. Okay, I'm gonna go get one Seagram's Escape, and you'll scan it. You scan it. Okay, you scan the barcode for me. What? How does it rate a hand sanitizer? Okay, uh, before
I,
Justin talks me any more into this, I'm going to the grocery store. I
I
need
believe Justin needs
rating
hand
water.
sanitizer.
Rating water. How do you rate water?
Dasani is shit. That's favorite water.
In terms
Everyone
of
knows
what though? What does that
Dasani is
mean?
shit.
Yeah, doesn't okay, most waters have additives. Sodium bicarbonate is a weird choice to add, but do you scan your like the 5 liter bottles or the big jugs that you get? 5 gallons? Scan those. Hmm. With the Weiss tap water. Okay, Justin. The runoff. Chemical runoff. Do you ever watch shoot, what's the movie? Doctor Strangelove? The fluoride. No, the fluoride in the water. Is that where you're getting this from? That's one of your heroes? The guy who went crazy and tried to start a nuclear war, that guy? Okay. Prepare your arguments about why Musk is a genius. Prepare them. I will be back. That is not the way you phrased it. That is not the way you phrased it.
When's the last time you even like streamed Valorant so I could watch it? Fuck you, faggot. Fucking faggot ass, faggot, faggot, faggot. Fucking faggy, faggy, waggy. Faggy, faggy, waggy, faggy. Faggot. Faggots in the game. Getting in my way. Fucking fag. Do, 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 do.
the original Christians, and that the Roman Church were before the establishment
Sleepy Justin, AFK again. So you're saying your head's always in your refrigerator. Sounds like fake news.
of the Roman Orthodox Church, dating back to the 1st century AD, the Gnostics were a sect of Christians with a very different set of beliefs from what the new blossoming religion of Christianity would soon become. The Gnostics insisted they were in fact the original Christians, and that the Roman Church were impostors, co-opting and changing their mythology. Many original founders, like Marcion and Tatian, were actually devout Gnostics who would later leave the orthodoxy, claiming the Church was, quote, setting up the fraud of historic Christianity. Gnosticism continued to flourish alongside the Roman Church until it was declared heresy and outlawed by Emperor Constantine in 325 AD. Once the Orthodox Bible became canonized, all extra-biblical Gnostic Gospels were considered heretical and either hidden or destroyed on threat of death. By the turn of the next century, any remaining Gnostics still openly practicing were hunted down as heretics. The Gnostics believed that there existed only one true absolute God, which the ancient Greeks referred to as agnostos theos, the unknown or unknowable God. This one true God, also called the monad, was ultimate and perfect, existing completely outside of creation, impossible to know or understand from our limited human perspective, described in the Apocryphon of John as illimitable, unfathomable, immeasurable, invisible, eternal, unutterable, and unnameable. This unknowable God produced a diverse group of spiritual beings called the Aeons, who lived in a heavenly dimension of fullness known as the Pleroma. Among the Aeons was a goddess named Sophia, who decided she wished to birth a divine being of her own without the involvement of a male partner, and without approval from her father, the one true God. The being she birthed was described as a miscarriage, or abortion, quote, having a serpent-like body with the head of a lion. And Sophia named him Yaldabaoth. The Gnostic texts referred to this creature as the Demiurge, or the godlike self-willed, who became a tyrannical, maniacal, selfish creator god himself. First, he produced a race of powerful minions called Archons to assist him. Then, together, they created their own world to rule over, which was a mirror image of the Pleroma. Next, the Demiurge and Archons created and animated the animals of the world, filling the land with cattle, the seas with fish, and the sky with birds. Finally, they attempted to create man, the copy of a heavenly being known as Adam. But they could not breathe life into him, and failed to animate his body. Seeing this as an opportunity, Sophia and some other Aeons from the Pleroma sent by the Monad came upon the Demiurge and insisted they could help breathe life into his Adam. A divine spark from Sophia was then bestowed upon man, bringing him to life and allowing all humans afterwards to contain this divine light within themselves. This spark of true light from the Pleroma made man more pure and more powerful than the Demiurge, which infuriated and made him jealous. To satisfy his spite, he made man mortal, and placed him in a paradisical realm called the Garden of Eden, filled with material delights made to distract him from his divinity. As you may have guessed by now, this Demiurge Yaldabaoth is better known in the Bible as Yahweh, or Jehovah in the Old Testament, where he's presented as though he is the monad, the one true God. In reality, however, as evidenced by several of the Gnostic Gospels removed from the Bible, Yahweh is actually only one of many lesser gods. In the Apocryphon of John it was written, "When he saw creation surrounding him, and the throng of angels around him, who had come forth from him, he said to them, I am a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me." But by announcing this, he suggested to the angels with him that there is another God. For if there were no other God, of whom would he be jealous? Jose Aragon wrote, "In the first centuries of our era, many of the Gnostic sects viewed the Creator God not as a good or just being, but as a satanic one. Many of them likened him to Satan. Gustavo Adolfo Becker relates in one of his accounts how the creator god Brahma created worlds, like bubbles, and how he experimented with them, as sometimes they turned out good, and sometimes not. The creator god is not a completely perfect god, but apparently quite inept. There are worlds which turn out badly, and he has to destroy them. There are worlds that turn out better. He tries, practices, creates through trial and error. The Bible says, quote, God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. How? Didn't he know? Didn't he know it was something good? That is why Gnostics say, we are in the presence of a creator, ignorant of the effects of his creation. Likewise, the creator God always maintains that he is the only one. He doesn't say it once, he says it all the time. He's constantly saying, I am the only God. There is no other God. I, your God, am the only one, etc. We all know that when someone repeats the same thing over and over again, it's because they're not sure of what they're saying, which is why they have to repeat it so often. The Gnostic's interpretation of this is that the Creator suspects, since he is not altogether sure, that there is another God higher than him, a God infinitely more superior to him, much bigger, much more important than him. And that is what he's trying to hide by incessantly repeating, I am the only one, there is no other God. The fact that Yahweh wasn't the only creator God is also evidenced within the Bible, such as the very first sentence, Bereshit bara Elohim, which translates to, in the beginning, the gods created. Because Elohim in Hebrew is not singular, but plural, meaning gods, or lords. Also, in Genesis 1:26, where, quote, God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. The use of plural pronouns like us and our implies Yahweh wasn't creating alone. Several books removed from the Bible make it clear who and why. In the Apocryphon of John, it is written that Yaldabaoth said to the archons with him, Come, let us create a human being after the image of God, and with a likeness to ourselves, so that this human image maketh us light. In other words, the Demiurge and his minions together created humanity in order to steal our light power. Gnostic texts differentiate between true light from the monad and false light from the Demiurge, such as in the Pistis Sophia, where it is written that Sophia had been deluded through the godlike self-willed Demiurge, and had not been deluded through anything else, save through a light power, because of its resemblance to the light in which she had had faith. Being an emanation and emissary of the true light, Sophia essentially represents the modern Christian equivalent of the Holy Spirit. She created the Demiurge in error upon descending to a lower heaven, but quickly recognizing her mistake, withheld from him and his archon minions the ability to hold within them the true light. Sophia then weeps, repents, and apologizes to the unknowable God, who forgives her and devises his own plan. He sends other aeons from the Pleroma to help breathe life into Yahweh's Adam, and when they do, give the divine light power, the Holy Spirit, to humanity. This makes the Creator God, already jealous of his minion helpers, now even more jealous of his creations. The Apocryphon of John states, At once the rest of the powers became jealous. Although Adam had come into being through all of them, and they had given their power to this human, Adam was more intelligent than the creators and the first ruler. When they realized that Adam was enlightened, and could think more clearly than they, and was stripped of evil, they took and threw Adam into the lowest part of the whole material realm. The Garden of Eden was created to be a paradise of plenty, where Adam would not want for anything, and live in blissful blind ignorance. In Eden, Adam existed in a kind of sleep state, unaware of who he was or where he came from. Yahweh placed him in such a paradise not for his pleasure, but for the express purpose that Adam would forget about his own divinity, his true heavenly home, and the one true God. The Apocryphon of John continues, "The rulers took Adam and put him in paradise. They said, 'Eat,' meaning do so in a leisurely manner, but in fact their pleasure is bitter, and their beauty is perverse. Their pleasure is a trap. Their trees are a sacrilege. Their fruit is deadly poison. Their promise is death. They put their tree of life in the middle of paradise. But the rulers lingered in front of what they call the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is enlightened afterthought, so that Adam might not behold its fullness and recognize his shameful nakedness. Enlightened afterthought hid herself within Adam. The first ruler wanted to take her from Adam's side, but enlightened afterthought cannot be apprehended. While darkness pursued her, it did not apprehend her. The first ruler removed part of Adam's power, and created another figure in the form of a female, like the image of afterthought that had appeared to him. He put the part he had taken from the power of the human being into the female creature. It did not happen, however, the way Moses said, Adam's rib. Adam saw the woman beside him. At once enlightened afterthought appeared and removed the veil that covered his mind. He sobered up from the drunkenness of darkness. He recognized his counterpart and said, "This is now bone from my bones, and flesh from my flesh." The demiurge removed not Adam's rib, as Moses claimed in Genesis, but a part of the light power from the monad which animated him, and it is that which animated Eve. Recognizing the pure light of the one inside her, Adam grew to know true love. Sophia successfully atoned for her accident by bringing enlightened afterthought to material creation, but the demiurge also succeeded in keeping Adam and Eve in a state of spiritual ignorance, blind to their divine nature. A messenger was needed, a light-bearer from the one true God, to open their eyes. According to the Gnostic Gospels, the unknowable God sent Lucifer, an angel of pure fire and light, to show man his true origin and stir the divine spirit inside him. Jose Aragon wrote, "Gnostic myths relate that Lucifer is the messenger of the unknowable God. We had said that this God, the greatest one, unreachable and unknowable, is unable to penetrate this limited universe of impure and satanic matter. But according to these myths, he can send someone, Lucifer." Gnostics consider that the biblical myth of creation can be explained as follows. The creator Satan of the world trapped Adam and Eve in his miserable world, and Lucifer, in the form of a serpent, offered them the forbidden fruit of saving Gnosis, and showed them that the Creator was deceiving them. In other words, the Creator said to man, "But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." On the other hand, the serpent said, "You will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." The Creator lied. He said that man would die if he ate the fruit, but man did not die. The serpent was telling the truth. The Creator himself ended up agreeing that the serpent was right. Gnostics believe that this serpent, Lucifer, is the liberator of man and the world. Of course, this messenger of the unknowable God, Lucifer, is an opponent and an enemy of the Creator of this world. Gnosis states that the Creator wants to keep man captive in this limited, inferior, and impure dimension. He also forbade man contact with the higher world, represented in the biblical myth by the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But Lucifer, the angel of light, made a great sacrifice and descended into this satanic hell to give the forbidden fruit of Gnosis to man, and opened his eyes so that he would be able to remember his divine origin and his superiority in relation to the Creator. After Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, the Creator God, revealing his lack of omniscience, arrived in Eden, unable to find them. Like a master calling his servant, Jehovah beckoned, asking, "Where are you?" He had created humanity with the intention of indentured servitude, wanting man to be ignorant of his origins, and incapable of distinguishing between good and evil. This is why he was waiting in the garden with a death threat, falsely warning them of their demise should they dare to eat the forbidden fruit. This is also why once they did eat of the fruit, and his lie was exposed, Jehovah exiled Adam and Eve from his garden paradise and condemned humanity forever thereafter to so-called original sin. Jose Aragon wrote, "Eden wasn't paradise, but just the opposite." In his book La Franc-Maçonnerie, Father Leon Murin describes the interpretations of the earthly paradise and the serpent of Genesis, and the following ideas come up. Jehovah does not want man to know his origin or his great destiny. He forbids all contact with the higher world. He wants man to be a reflection of him, the Creator, and not a reflection of the Supreme God. But man did wake up, and he did become aware of good and evil. Lucifer took the form of a serpent to wake man up. He is a messenger of the Supreme God, the
Where's the
unknowable
Valorant
God.
gameplay?
He is a messenger of the true God who came into this imperfect, inadequate, and wretched world to wake up and liberate man, to show him
I
his
thought you
true
were into, like,
situation and what his
Morrow
great
games,
destiny
so I
could
can
be
watch.
like. For this reason, those who follow
I
the
could
orders
evaluate
of the
your
Creator
performance.
God consider the serpent to be something malicious and satanic,
Maybe
and
not
in
right
all
now.
this
It's already 8.
confusion,
You're gonna go to bed
liken
in like
it
2
with
hours.
Satan. On the other hand, Gnostics see the serpent Lucifer as a savior,
Fake news, little
someone
bro.
who came to save man, a messenger of the true God. This serpent of
Fake
enlightenment,
news.
which brought gnosis, Gnostic truth, which allows the authentic and true nature of things to be seen in this world of confusion, came to liberate man. So what these Roman Orthodox Christian conspirators achieved by eliminating these key books from the Bible was threefold. Firstly, and most importantly, they completely removed God from the Bible. All mentions of the one true unknowable God have been replaced by the demiurge Jehovah. This is why the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament seem like two completely different entities, because they are. The God of the Old Testament is vindictive, genocidal, and psychopathic, whereas the God of the New Testament is loving, compassionate, and forgiving. As early Christian Gnostics like Marcion stated, the God of the Old Testament is not the God of the New Testament. They are two different gods. The first is a God who applies law and punishes, whereas the other is a God of love who always forgives. The two are irreconcilable. The good God that sent Christ the Savior to Bethlehem in the New Testament is the same good God that sent Lucifer the Savior to Eden in the Old Testament. Meanwhile, the evil God that lied to Adam and punished all of humanity thereafter for Eve's disobedience is the same evil God that ordered human and animal sacrifices and genocided humanity in the flood. It is clear that these must be two completely different entities. But Christian conspirators like Origen insisted, quote, "There are not two different gods, one fair and the other good. It is the same God, and he is fair and good." This is how the unknowable God was effectively removed from the Bible, and how the demiurge Jehovah came to be viewed as just and perfect. Secondly, if the demiurge is now supposedly good, fair, and perfect, who is to blame for all the evil in the world? If all the divine attributes of the ethically upstanding New Testament God
Like
have
almost
been
92
force-fed
necromancer.
onto the morally bankrupt Old Testament God, who is the new scapegoat? The Gnostics blamed
and then
all
I'll be
evil,
540,
suffering,
99.
and negativity in this world on the demiurge creator God himself, who they viewed as Satan.
You know what I'm
But the
saying?
Roman Orthodox conspirators needed a new enemy, some new Satan to take his place. Who better than Lucifer, the light bearer, the angel of light sent from the unknowable
mean?
God to enlighten humanity? Thus the conspirators turned Lucifer into Satan, and turned the satanic demiurge into God. Jose Aragon in The Forbidden Religion wrote, "The evil of the demiurge has been taken outside
First off, I would never
to a
say I could be
Satan
100.
different from
Fake
the
news.
Creator. Now it is this new Satan who likes blood, the smell of burnt flesh,
99.
the slaves, wars, rituals, sacrifices,
I want
conspiracies,
to. I can get
and
99
genocide.
tonight.
Now it is this new Satan who enjoys the fact that men bow down
I want
before
to.
him in adoration and make covenants of blood pacts with him in exchange for power or earthly wealth. It is
You are
easy
the
to
clown.
discover that all the characteristics which Satan now has were taken from the
You-
Creator God of the Bible. So this is what we have. The unknowable God does not exist.
Justin is the clown.
His attributes have been
Blah, blah,
transferred
blah,
to the
blah.
demiurge, and the attributes of the demiurge have been transferred
like
to
the
a
fun-
Satan outside of him.
You're
What
like
does
the
this
final
great
boss
conspiracy,
clown,
this
you
big
know?
scam now need? What is lacking is someone who we can transform this Satan into. It has to be someone who we very much
You know
hate,
what?
since
You would
Satan is
think
the most
that.
wretched figure that we can conceive of. It occurred to someone that the most appropriate way would be to disclose the fact that this evil Satan is none other than Lucifer. In this way, not only is the demiurge cleansed of his satanic nature, but the figure of Lucifer is also completely distorted. The angel of light, sent by the unknowable God to save mankind, was transformed into a monster whose function is to keep man enslaved.
What's the difference between actually
Lastly,
2 and back to
now that the
3?
one true God had been eliminated from the Bible,
Oh, increase the
the
soul attraction
satanic
by
demiurge had
100%.
co-opted all the
And what does
divine
attraction
attributes
3
of
do?
God, and Lucifer, the monad's angel of light, had
150%.
become Satan. The final change the Christian conspirators needed
What does
was to
multiply
redefine
3 do?
hell, then blame mankind for the existence of evil. The Gnostic Gospels make it clear that this world
Spiritual
is a broken
output by
simulation,
60%.
designed by a demented designer, created by an
Requires
evil creator.
103 necromancy.
This dense material dimension full of suffering and death, created by the demiurge, is the
Do
only
you
hell.
see in this, Justin?
But to hide this, hell instead became another even worse place of punishment for all those who dare disobey the demiurge.
you're
Meanwhile,
you're
the
sleeping,
obvious
Justin.
imperfections and evils of this world would never be accepted as the perfect paradise of a loving, benevolent creator.
Justin, I
So
want to
what
become. I want
justification
to become
could
an
be
ice
given?
agent.
Jose Aragon wrote,
I
"But
want to
how
work
did
for.
all
I
that
think that'd
perfect
be
creation
my
come to
dream
be
job.
transformed into something as imperfect as it
I
is
just got to
today?
go around up all the fucking.
Here lies the brilliance of the
People around the
apostles in
country.
the deception. It was man's fault that creation became impure and imperfect. The Creator,
They're
a
illegal.
perfect
That's
being,
what's wrong with them.
created the perfect world, but man ruined it.
They're all.
Paradise was perfect, but man and the
they're
serpent
raping our
Lucifer
women.
destroyed this
What do you mean,
perfection,
what do I do that's
following
illegal?
with it. So we have a good and perfect Creator who accomplished good and perfect work. All his
Exactly.
creation,
See, you're just
matter,
gonna name one
time,
thing.
man, were good. Paradise was a perfect place, and man lived there happily. All this went wrong and deteriorated due to the disobedience of man. To state that man is to blame for the original
Wait,
sin
what?
and for the fall has been one of the crudest ideas conceived against the Spirit
You
and
can
the
name
true
several
God.
what?
Man has been held responsible for the incompetence of the Creator and the shortcomings of his work. We have already seen that man was nothing more than an ignorant servant in paradise. He ignored everything concerning himself and his Creator,
Delulu.
as it appears he is still doing. He did not know that another God existed who was immensely superior to the Creator
okay.
God. He did not know that beyond his body and soul, he had a spirit imprisoned. He did not even know until he woke up and was able to rebel. For Gnosis,
Put a bunch of
the
this
only
back on the
original
list,
sin that
okay.
existed was that committed by the Demiurge on binding the eternal spirits to the mortal soul of man. For Gnosis, the only fall that existed, and helped along by the
cringe.
Demiurge, was the fall of our spirits into the hellish world of matter.
No one's ever seen bigger cringe. So you want to be like an ice agent with me?
Similar to the early Christian Gnostics, there existed
not?
a sect in southern France known as the Cathars, who considered themselves the only true
Wouldn't it be
Christians
cool
of
to
their
like
era.
stock on some polar?
The Roman Orthodox Church
fucking
vehemently
college
disagreed with
version
this,
door?
of course, so just
What?
like Gnosticism, Catharism was outlawed, and they too
You're
were
a
hunted
hater.
down as heretics. In fact, the
Oh,
Cathars were the first Christian group
You're
targeted
the
by the
biggest
Catholic
hater.
Crusades, and the very first Inquisition was specifically created to torture Cathars. On June 22nd, 1209, Pope Innocent III sent his Crusader army to the town of Béziers in the Languedoc province of southern France, who were celebrating their feast day of the Magdalene. Headed by Inquisitor Arnaud Amalric, the Catholic Crusader army gathered outside the Béziers city walls and demanded an ultimatum of the townsfolk. They were allegedly
biggest
harboring
hater.
200
I hate the
high-ranking
way you
Cathar
walk
leaders
through
known
these
as
songs.
Perfecti within the city, and
Hate
were
the way
ordered
you
to
dress.
turn them over. The townsfolk refused, and
Hate the way you
continued their
sneak
feast day
this.
celebrations,
Podcast like
which
Sam
enraged and
Direct.
caused Inquisitor Amalric to declare that they shall all, quote, die as heretics rather than live as Christians. When asked by his army how to determine which of the townsfolk were the Cathar leaders to be exterminated, he answered, "Kill them all. God will know his own." Thus the Crusaders sieged and sacked the town, murdering nearly 20,000 people before the day was finished, mostly women and children. Crusades against the Cathars continued for the next 40 years, until the entire sect was eliminated off the face of the earth. Their final stand occurred on March 16th, 1244, at their fortress on Mount Segur. For 9 months, the Crusader army was held at bay, until finally a siege of catapults succeeded in knocking down their castle walls, and the remaining 210 Cathar perfecti protected inside were burned at the stake. So who were these Cathars, and what did they believe? Why did they consider themselves, like the Gnostics, to be the only true Christians? And why were they deemed so hated and heretical by the Church of Rome that they needed to be genocided? The Cathars viewed all of material reality, including our physical bodies, as nothing but a prison for our immortal souls. Like the Gnostics, they believed the creator god of the Old Testament was actually Satan, referred to in Cathar texts as Rex Mundi, the king of this world, whereas the god of the New Testament was the one true god of light and good. The Cathar creation story states that Rex Mundi ascended to the Pleroma, wanting to enter, but was refused. After patiently waiting for 1,000 years, he successfully snuck into heaven, then promptly promised the heavenly angels every worldly pleasure to tempt them to leave with him. He said they were slaves, that God never gave them anything and owned everything around them, but if they followed him, he would provide them with wonderful riches, beautiful partners, and extravagant foods. For 9 days and 9 nights, Rex Mundi seduced the heavenly angels down through a hole in the Pleroma he had created and into his evil world, before the good gods sealed it shut. Once the divine spirits had fallen, they found themselves in physical bodies, in a dense material realm, without any of the pleasures promised. When they repented and asked to return to heaven, Rex Mundi refused, and replied that the physical bodies he had fashioned for them would now bind them to earth and make them forget all about their heavenly home. Meanwhile, the one true God, disappointed and distraught, decided the fallen angels needed to work towards his grace and forgiveness by struggling within these physical body prisons, and thus made a deal with the devil. Satan could do what he wanted with these physical bodies. The individual souls which animated them belonged to God, and could return to him once they renounced the body and all of its temptations. The devil agreed to this deal, and the rest is human history. Trapped in these physical bodies, the individual soul essence was condemned to repeatedly live, die, and reincarnate into new bodies for as long as that soul remained attached to worldly things and desiring material pleasures. Thus, for the Cathars, the whole purpose of human existence is to repent and renounce our worldly desires and attachments in order to return to heaven. Our lives are seen as a dualistic struggle between the worldly temptations of the flesh and the spiritual peace of the soul. As Mani, the originator of Manichaeism, a forerunner to Catharism, stated, "Souls are prisoners of darkness, and they must fight to recover their original destiny, abandoning the body that imprisons them." For the Cathars, all of material reality, including their physical bodies, were seen as a prison, caging their pure spiritual essence. They aimed to leave this world forever and return to paradise, believing that anyone who failed would be doomed to repeated reincarnations. Their solution was a sacred rite known as the Consolamentum, which was the cornerstone of Catharism. This ritual could only be performed by Cathar priests known as perfecti, who were pairs of one man and one woman that lived together according to a strict set of rules. The perfecti took vows of poverty, pacifism, vegetarianism, and antinatalism. Since they viewed all of material reality as evil, childbirth was discouraged and seen as a sin that condemned souls to be trapped in the reincarnation cycle. The last step to becoming a perfecti was completing the Consolamentum ceremony and living a sinless life according to their vows until death, which they believed would allow them to return to heaven. Regular Cathars, known as credentes, also had the opportunity to perform the consolamentum once during their lifetime. But since the vows were so sacred and irreversible, most would only do so on their deathbeds,
Would you go to the
often
bike bar you want
refusing
to go
food
to?
and
I want
water
to push the
afterwards.
bikes up.
The consolamentum washed away their sins, but bound them by oath to pure
Yeah,
principles
you like
thereafter.
can line them up. You can push
So
one.
performing the
push them
ritual
all
late
over.
in
So right
life
as we
was
leave, I'm
actually
like push a bike
advised,
over, push
making
them
it
all
easier
over.
to live one's last days in a
And
sinless state.
then we have to drive.
Howdy
We drive
Mikowski
fast.
wrote, "It was deemed the
What would you
baptism
do
of
if
Holy
I pushed
Spirit
all
by
their
fire,
bikes over and then
like the
jumped in your car?
Pentecost,
And I was like,
considered the
drive.
real teaching of Christ, that was supposed to remove all sin once the ceremony concluded. As mentioned earlier,
No,
once you had a
that's
consolamentum ceremony,
snitching. That's
you could not have another,
You're a rat.
because after completing the ceremony, one could no longer sin. Most would have this ceremony as death was approaching, for the likelihood of further sin was greatly reduced. Only perfecti could
Degen.
administer the consolamentum, and from what has been
It's
preserved,
degenerate that you would
it
even think
seems
to turn me
amazingly
over.
simple. It included the reading of several biblical passages with a focus on the Gospel of John and the Lord's Prayer, many calls for the good God to remove all sin, and ended with an experience referred to as the laying of hands upon the person. The Cathars held as their main belief that this was a world created by an evil god, Rex Mundi, who kept them in a reincarnation cycle, and their only focus in this life was to escape it. The Cathars were not concerned with making this place better, finding new forms of government, or commerce, or anything else. Their focus was to escape the evil realm of the Rex Mundi forever, and return home to the Father. The Cathars had no fear of going to hell after death, because they felt that the only hell that existed was this material realm. Reincarnation was the fear, for it is what would force them back into a body, and therefore back into hell.
When we discuss various atrocities and violent tragedies that have occurred across history, one of the most common topics that comes up is that of the Crusades. Now, most of these Crusades, at least the most famous ones, were aimed at taking back areas that had been conquered by the Muslims, especially the Holy City of Jerusalem. But another one of the most major crusades in the Middle Ages was one that took place within European Christendom itself. The so-called Albigensian Crusade was an attempt by the Catholic Church to root out what they saw as a dangerous heresy that had erupted in southern
These
France
people are
and northern Italy.
vandalizing
These
Teslas
supposed
now?
heretics, at least if we are to believe the Catholic chroniclers, held beliefs that were sometimes very different, indeed sometimes very diametrically opposite
I'm waiting for
to
somebody to
the
assassinate him.
mainstream doctrines of the Catholic Church, and which,
Who's gonna
according to
do
some
it? It's like
scholars,
every-
may have had connections to various religious movements of antiquity, like the Gnostics and the Manichaeans. Now, this fascinating group
know,
in
that's what I'm
medieval
saying, dude.
Western Europe has become known as the Cathars.
I keep seeing TikToks and everyone's like, okay,
We're
we
back
all
in
know,
medieval
like,
Europe.
they won't say
A
anything. They'll just say, like,
tumultuous
okay,
time,
we
to
all
say the
know that
least.
we all want
As
somebody
we've
to do
seen
it.
in previous
Who's
episodes, a
gonna do
lot
it?
is taking place at this time.
And
Well,
everyone in the
violence, of
comments is like,
course,
yes,
as the
get
Catholic
him.
Church
Musk is
becomes
next.
increasingly interested in clamping down on perceived threats, both
Gotta keep
politically
getting
and religiously. But paradoxically, this is
That's what I'm
also a
saying,
time of
dude.
intellectual flourishing. Contrary to popular belief,
just
medieval
kill him.
Europe gave us some of the most significant philosophers and thinkers in history, many of whom were hugely original and presented daring ideas.
What is this
And in
called gonna
spite of
do?
the church's
His-
all-encompassing
his-
authority in all matters religion,
His
we
cult
still
is
see
just a bunch of
various
degenerate
religious
fuckboys
movements
who don't
appear
leave
at this
their
time.
house. Like,
And one of the most
what are they gonna
fascinating
do?
and noteworthy of these are the so-called Cathars, who posed perhaps
Yes,
the biggest
I'm
threat to
absolutely down
Catholic
to kill
authority at the time. The Cathars flourished in Western Europe from the second half of the 12th century to the first half of the 14th, especially in the region known as Languedoc, which is located primarily in southern France. Teaching a doctrine of strict dualism and anti-materialism, the
I say we kill 'em
Cathars were
all.
harshly
That's what I say.
condemned by the Catholics as demonic heretics
execution
opposed to
style.
the central tenets of Christian beliefs, and were, for this reason, wiped out in the Albigensian Crusade and the Inquisitions that were connected to it. And thus, even before we start the discussion itself, we've already run into our first problem. You know the old saying, history is told by the victors.
We need to kill the old people first. All the old people in Congress, all the old people in the government. We'll kill the billionaires first, then the old people, then the CEOs. I think. Yeah, the will. We just need.
Embark on a journey with us as we delve into the hidden realms of history, religion, philosophy, and the occult at Sanctum Arcanum on Discord. You can find a link in the description below. The Sethians, often referred to as classic
The problem is, like,
Gnostics,
back in the
are a
day,
captivating
wealthy
and
people had,
enigmatic
like,
series of
hoard
groups that
gold
emerged
and
during
money,
the late 1st
like,
and early 2nd
in their
centuries CE.
homes, and then you could
Its
just go
identity
and
was
kill them and
shaped in
take it
stark
when
contrast
you
to
got
the
mad.
growing
Now it's, like, all
apostolic Christianity
digital.
of its time. While the term Sethian is a modern scholarly label,
Well,
early
even if you killed him,
sources
you
such as
couldn't do
Irenaeus
anything to his
and
money.
Plotinus simply referred to this group as Gnostics.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is we
Within
can't,
their
like,
sacred
we have to
texts,
have, like, the
the
institution
Sethians
to-
assumed a number of
they're on his side.
self-designations,
That's the
such
problem.
as the unshakable generation, the seed of Seth, or the children of light. Understanding the Sethians and other early Gnostic groups has been a historical challenge. For much of our history, our sources for information about these groups were writings by heresiologists and opposing figures such as Irenaeus and Epiphanius. These writers approached the Gnostics critically and often sought to label them as heretics. Consequently, the picture we had of the Sethians and related traditions were heavily influenced by the perspectives of their adversaries. However, in 1945, a monumental discovery in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, revolutionized our understanding of these early groups. The Nag Hammadi Library, a collection of Coptic texts, was unearthed, and it contained an abundance of Gnostic and Christian texts, as well as some Hermetic texts and parts of Plato's Republic. Many of these Gnostic texts had been mentioned in the works of the heresiologists, like Irenaeus and others who critiqued the Gnostics. With the discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library, we gained direct access into the writings and perspectives of these early groups, allowing us to move beyond the one-sided narratives of their opponents. Sethian Gnosticism was a loose movement comprising of independent groups that shared common texts, beliefs, and practices. These congregations appear to have existed independently of the proto-Orthodox Christian groups that were gaining prominence at the time. Sethian teachers seem to have enjoyed a considerable degree of freedom in interpreting or reinterpreting their common mythology and cosmology. As such, many minor variations on common themes can be found within their surviving corpus of work, some of which were no doubt the result of personal revelation or altered states of consciousness. The practice of the Sethians included prayer, congregational activity, rituals of meditative spiritual ascent, and fivefold baptism, as well as the use of mantra-like chants. The essence of this spiritual journey for the Sethians was transformation, a rebirth into the spirit, a departure from the confines of mortal existence towards the transcendence of the pleroma, the divine realm. Like other Gnostic schools of thought, the Sethians were syncretic, drawing from diverse sources such as Second Temple Judaism, Platonism, classical Egyptian religion, and the nascent Christian teachings. The Sethians have left behind a significant corpus of texts, such as Allogenes the Stranger, the Apocalypse of Adam, the Apocryphon of John, the Gospel of Judas, the Holy Book of the Great Invisible Spirit, the untitled text of the Bruce Codex, the Hypostasis of Archons, Marsanes, Melchizedek, the Thought of Norea, the Three Steles of Seth, the Trimorphic Protonoia, and Zostrianos. The Sethian mythology and cosmology is rather complex, so it is important that I cover some key concepts beforehand. The Father, the Monad, or the Great Invisible Spirit, is the ultimate divine principle, or Godhead, that is beyond all comprehension, and is infinite, eternal, unknowable, and the absolute highest source. The One is the invisible Spirit. We should not think of it as a God, or like a God, for it is greater than a God, because it has nothing over it and no Lord above it. It does not exist within anything inferior to it, since everything exists within it. For it established itself. It is eternal, since it does not need anything, for it is absolutely complete. It has never lacked anything in order to be completed by it. Rather, it is always absolutely complete in light. The One is illimitable, since there is nothing before it to limit it. Unfathomable, since there is nothing before it to fathom it. Immeasurable, since there was nothing before it to measure it. Invisible, since nothing has seen it. Eternal, since it exists eternally. Unutterable, since nothing could comprehend it to utter it. Unnameable, since there was nothing before it to give it a name. The One is the immeasurable light, pure, holy, immaculate. It is unutterable, and is perfect in incorruptibility. Not that it is just perfection, or blessedness, or divinity. It is much greater. The One is not corporeal, and it is not incorporeal. The One is not large, and it is not small. It is impossible to say, how much is it? What kind is it? For no one can understand it. The Aeons are divine emanations and acting figures within the Sethian mythology, often paired in sets of two with a male and female counterpart, or what we would call a syzygy. Together, with the source from which they emanate, they form the Pleroma, or fullness. The Pleroma is the divine realm, or fullness of being. These Aeons form a descending divine hierarchy, extending from the unknowable God at the pinnacle down to the material world. The Aeons are simultaneously actors, places, extents of time, and modes of thought. They mostly have names of ideal qualities, abstractions, or mental operations, such as intelligence, truth, form, afterthought, and wisdom. The Aeons that make up the entirety result from the invisible spirit's knowledge or thought of itself. They are its thinking, or its intellect, in all its complexity. They form also a spiritual realm, the equivalent of Plato's realm of ideal forms. Barbelo is the first Aeon to be emanated, and is the closest to the imperceivable Father. This Aeon is portrayed as the Divine Mother. Barbelo plays a very important role in the Sethian cosmology. Some even refer to the Sethians as Barbeloites due to the prominent emphasis of this figure. She, the first power, the glory of Barbelo, the perfect glory among the Aeons, the glory of revelation, she glorified and praised the Virgin Spirit, for because of the Spirit she had come forth. She is the first thought and the image of Spirit. She became the universal womb, for she precedes everything. Sophia, or wisdom, also known as metanoia, or repentance, is the last of the Sethian Aeons to be emanated. The fall of Sophia is attributed to her desire. Like the Father, she wanted to fashion something from her own essence, The fall of Sophia is seen as representing the human experience. Having fallen into disorder and error, she then repents and receives both forgiveness and restoration. This story of the fall of Sophia is told in either terms of her acting alone in imitation of the invisible spirit and without her male partner, or acting at the command of Elilith, yet committing some error that later results in a portion of her light being stolen by her creation, Yaldabaoth. These fragments of light would go on to become the souls of humanity. She wanted to bring forth something like herself, without the consent of the spirit, who had not given approval. Without her partner, and without his consideration, the male did not give approval. She did not find her partner, and she considered this without the spirit's consent, and without the knowledge of her partner. Nonetheless, she gave birth. It is through this error, or misguided act of creation, that she gave birth, and from this event, eventually leads to the creation of the material world. This figure that Sophia gave birth to evolved into the malevolent world creator, known as the Demiurge, named Yaldabaoth. When Sophia saw what her desire had produced, it changed into the figure of a snake, with the face of a lion. Its eyes were like flashing bolts of lightning. Yaldabaoth, otherwise known as Saklas, Samael, the archon of creation, the counterfeit spirit, or the Demiurge, is the shaper of the material cosmos, and the one that set its rules in place. Essentially, he is portrayed as a lesser and false god, and is commonly associated with the God of the Old Testament. Yaldabaoth inherited divine power and a faint recollection of the Pleroma from his mother, Sophia, and he utilized these elements to craft his own world along with his loyal servants. Being capable of creation, he shaped the material world in an imperfect imitation of what he had seen of the Pleroma, yet also of cruelty and arrogance. And so, when appearing as a personified figure in the mythological narrative, he tends to exemplify tyrannical and narcissistic personality traits, unable to acknowledge or truly understand what is above him and below him. The leader of the authorities is blind. Because of his power, ignorance, and arrogance, he said with power, "I am God, there is no other but me." When he said this, he sinned against the realm of the All. This boast rose up to incorruptibility, and a voice answered from incorruptibility and said, "You are wrong, Samael." The Archons, created by Yaldabaoth, were depicted as malevolent and cruel entities entrusted with dominion over the earthly realm. These Archons have bodies that are both female and male, and faces that are the faces of beasts. Their influence extended to manipulating human thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. These Archons collaborated with their superior, Yaldabaoth, in the act of world creation and persisted in aiding the Demiurge in enforcing his oppressive governance. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the authorities of the world and the spirits of wickedness. The material cosmos is the observable universe and realm of impermanent matter in which we presently find ourselves, a place of passion and division, and in some ways a reflection of the beauty in the Pleroma, yet imperfect due to its unstable, impermanent nature, and the presence of suffering and death within it. Human souls are compelled to continually reincarnate into this realm by the archonic powers, until they are able to transcend it and return to the Pleroma above. The Pneuma, otherwise known as the divine spark or soul, is carried within us all. It is a piece of the divine sundered from its source, which in station is exalted far above the material world in which it finds itself, and which longs to escape the binds of materiality and the cycle of incarnation in order to return to its home in the Pleroma above. I said, "My lord, am I also from their matter? You and your offspring are from the Father, who is from the beginning. The souls come from above, from incorruptible light." For the Sethians, divinity was not merely a subject of intellectual inquiry, but a profound experience, a direct apprehension known as gnosis. Within the broad category of Gnosticism, you will commonly find the emphasis and faith in salvific knowledge known as gnosis, which is essentially a personal, experiential revelation directly from the divine. Through obtaining gnosis, humankind finds liberation from the earthly condition of oblivion and death. This is also how you can acquire heaven's kingdom for yourselves. Unless you acquire it through gnosis, you will not be able to find it. While this quote is from a Valentinian Gnostic text, it truly does a great job at emphasizing the importance of gnosis. For the Sethians, the world was perceived as being governed by the Archons. They posited that these Archons had raped Eve shortly after her creation, later resulting in the birth of Cain and Abel, who were devoid of the divine spark. At the heart of the Sethians' beliefs lies a core myth centered around their identity as the spiritual descendants of Seth. Seth, both a heavenly archetype and the true-born son of Adam and Eve, was a pivotal figure in the book of Genesis. Seth's birth is recounted as a response to the tragic event of Abel's murder by his brother, Cain. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, who Cain slew. This passage emphasizes Seth as a replacement for Abel, symbolizing God's divine plan. The Sethians discerned layers of meaning in the descriptions in Genesis, drawing connections between Seth's origin and their own spiritual beliefs. In contrast to Cain and Abel, Seth was conceived through a loving union between Adam and Eve, ensuring that the divine spark remained intact for Seth. Therefore, Seth represented another seed, signifying a spiritual lineage distinct from the purely physical lineages of Cain and Abel. This distinction was central to the Sethian cosmology, where the possession of the divine spark marked the potential for salvation through gnosis. The Sethians identified themselves with the race of Seth, viewing their spiritual lineage as the chosen path towards salvation. Cain and Abel's lineages, in contrast, were seen as solely concerned with physical pleasures and frivolous human affairs, devoid of potential for salvation. The Archons, who sought to sabotage the spiritual development of Seth's descendants, imposed astrological fate and worldly temptations upon them. Yet, the Sethians believed in the eventual advent of a savior who would empower the spiritual descendants of Seth in their struggles, a divine intervention of sorts. Judas Iscariot is one of the most hated figures of Christianity today, as he is portrayed as the betrayer of Jesus, where the actions of Judas lead to his crucifixion. The Gospel of Judas is a Sethian text that offers a unique perspective on the biblical figure of Judas Iscariot. In the text, Jesus laughs about the ignorance of the other 12 disciples and suggests that they are worshiping a false god. When he drew near to his disciples, as they were assembled together, seated, and giving thanks over the bread, he laughed. The disciples said to him, "Master, why are you laughing at our prayer of thanksgiving? What is it we have done? This is what is proper." He answered and said to them, "I'm not laughing at you. You aren't doing this out of your own will, but because, in this way, your God will be praised." They said, "Master, you are the Son of our God." Jesus said to them, "How is it that you know me? I tell you the truth, no generation will know me among the people who are with you." Jesus also predicts Judas's role in the betrayal and crucifixion, stating that Judas will sacrifice the physical body of Jesus to liberate his divine spark. "But you will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man who bears me. Already your horn has been lifted up, and your anger has flared up, and your star has burned brightly, and your heart has grown strong." The Gospel of Judas implies that Judas's actions were part of a divine plan. In this text, Judas is portrayed not as a traitor, but as a trusted disciple who carried out Jesus' secret instructions. Within the text, Jesus reveals secret knowledge to Judas, as Judas is depicted as the only one capable of understanding these profound teachings. The Gospel of Judas presents a very differing interpretation of Judas's actions and a different perspective on the events of Jesus' life. In the Genesis narrative of the Old Testament, the serpent is often associated with evil and temptation, commonly identified with Satan, as it encourages Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge, leading to their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. However, for the Sethians, the serpent is seen in a more positive light, as a messenger from the Pleroma, urging Adam and Eve to achieve salvation from the world. Then, the female spiritual presence came in the shape of a serpent, the instructor. The serpent taught Adam and Eve and said, "What did Samael say to you? Did he say, 'You may eat from every tree in the garden, but do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil'?" The woman of flesh said, "Not only did he say, 'Do not eat,' but also 'Do not touch it, for the day you eat from it, you will surely die.' The serpent, the instructor, said, 'You will not surely die, for he has said this to you out of jealousy. Rather, your eyes will open, and you will be like gods, knowing good and evil.' And the female instructor was taken away from the serpent, and she abandoned it as something of the earth." In the Sethian perspective, the figures urging Adam and Eve to not eat from the tree of knowledge is the malevolent demiurge, Yaldabaoth, and his archons attempting to trick Adam and Eve. The rulers took Adam and put him in the garden, that
We know that the planet Saturn has a hexagram, a perfect hexagram at its north pole. What very few people know is that this hexagram has been known about by ancient people for as long as history has been recorded. People who did not have telescopes or the technology to view anything outside of the Earth's atmosphere besides the stars. That is quite the paradox. That's what's been on my mind lately about this subject. It is, number one, absolutely impossible for these people to have viewed Saturn, especially North Pole. Saturn being associated with the black cube, which has direct connection to the hexagon shape, which is a 2D format of the cube, proves to us without a doubt that these people over the centuries from all over the world understood that there was this anomaly at the peak of Saturn. This has led Saturn to be a leading role in astrology and mythology throughout the ages, and even to this day is part of our pop culture. So when you go down the rabbit hole of the Saturn mythology, you get into this Gnosticism, where Saturn is considered a great teacher, but through suffering specifically. It's been associated with the bringer of light, Lucifer, the primordial star, or the original black star is what it was called. It's also been called the black cube, of course the cube representing that 2D format of it, the hexagon at the top. And the people who understood that there was a hexagon at the North Pole of Saturn must have been either in
Gnostic literature is, at least at first glance, rather puzzling. For instance, if one were to pick up a copy of the Nag Hammadi library, and either the Meyer or the Robinson edition, one would be confronted with hundreds of pages of literature, but no real idea where to begin studying it. Some titles seem vaguely familiar, like the Prayer of the Apostle Paul, or the various Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, Philip, or Mary, or perhaps even the Acts of Peter. While other texts appear downright strange, like the Discourse of the Ogdoad to the Ennead or the Trimorphic Protanoia. Yeah, Trimorphic Protanoia. Completely clear. And of course, that's not to mention that many of these texts are filled with long, complicated, and obscure mythologies, words that are incredibly unusual, long strings of vowels for some reason, and many texts are sadly mere fragments. It's honestly overwhelming, and it's very natural to ask, where in the world do I begin studying this vast corpus that we now call Gnostic literature? In this episode of Esoterica, I want to offer an answer to just that question. In my opinion, the best place to start studying Gnostic literature is a text called the Secret Book of John, or sometimes referred to as the Apocryphon of John. Now, while the Apocryphon of John is, at least in my opinion, one of the best places to start studying Gnostic literature, that doesn't at all indicate that it's going to be a walk in the park. However, I think by studying the Apocryphon of John rather closely, one does get some appreciation of what we might call Gnostic mythology and the overall tenor of the kind of literature that one might encounter in something like the Nag Hammadi Library or the Bruce Codex. Further, I think by studying the Apocryphon of John, one does get some sense of the overall tenor of what we might call Gnostic Christianity, although again, I have to say that with some degree of caveats. Also, I think what's interesting about the Apocryphon of John is that it disrupts some of the stereotypes often grouped with the idea of Gnosticism. So I hope you'll join me as we explore the Secret Book of John, or the Apocryphon of John, a foundational text of what scholars now refer to as Gnosticism. I'm Dr. Justin Sledge, and welcome to Esoterica, where we explore the arcane side of history.
God, owning our error, accepting our fate. I'm Michael Dowd, and I'm recording this in October of 2021. The other subtitle could be Eco-Theology 101. An ecological and deep time historical, that is an eco-theo, and I'll explain that here in a few minutes. An eco-theo worldview is vital for understanding how and why nothing can slow, stop, or reverse what necessarily follows ecological overshoot. Unsustainable civilizations can never become sustainable as they're collapsing. In fact, they can't become sustainable. They've never become sustainable ever. We have over 100 examples. Technology and the market hasten and expand collapse and multiply extinctions. Science and religion have unknowingly conspired to create a literal hell on earth. The near-term extinction of Homo colossus, that is industrial civilization, is a certainty, and that may or may not include Homo sapiens. It is inevitable that most people will deny the above, and how and why that's okay. And it's still possible to avoid worst-case scenario and to live and love fully, even at Teotihuacan, that is the end of the world as we know it. So that's what this program is going to be covering. Thomas Berry, one of my great mentors, has two quotes. I'll show this one and another one, very similar. We're talking only to ourselves. We're not talking to the rivers. We're not listening to the wind and the climate. Most of the disasters that are happening now are a consequence of that spiritual deficit. My way of saying it is that we are committing ecocide because believers and atheists alike fail to relate to primary reality as primary. By not honoring and respecting the biosphere as our living and undeniably real biophysical creator, sustainer, and end, anthropocentric or human-centered civilizations inevitably self-destruct. So here's the outline of what I'll be covering in this presentation. God, owning our error, accepting our fate. And notice I have the earth emoji. I'm meaning by God, reality with a personality. I'll say more about that, a lot more about that. So our living, nested, biophysical creator, sustainer, and end. That's what I'm meaning by the word God. God's time, that is reality's time, the cosmic century timeline, and untrivializing idolatry. It's not bowing down to statues. God's nature, and religion's purpose, the 4 laws of true sustainability, problems versus predicaments, 6 ecocidal delusions, and what's really urgent, and then what is inevitable and what's unstoppable, and then also what's futile, and then what now? Living meaningfully and courageously in the end times. And make no mistake, we are in the end times, not just mythically speaking. So let's take a look at God, our living, nested biophysical creator, sustainer, and end. This is a fundamental principle of life, of true sustainability. Relate to the larger body of life as divine or perish. Or a more indigenous way of saying this would be relate to the community of life as kin or perish. It's sometimes called a kin-centric worldview rather than a human-centered worldview. John Michael Greer is one of my favorite authors. He says, the first law of life is limits. So we need to demythologize faith. Your God is whatever you put your faith or trust in. It's your ultimate concern. And this isn't just Michael Dowd saying this, arguably the most influential theologian of the 20th century, Paul Tillich, famously identified faith as your ultimate concern. Ludwig Wittgenstein was one of the most famous philosophers of the 20th century, philosopher of language. He says, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. And nowhere is that more true than our name or names for our biophysical creator, sustainer, and end. This reality, which is not about beliefs, it's inescapably real. And what we know is that reality is nested. And how we name it is an existential issue. That is, it's a life or death issue. I like these Russian nesting dolls, subatomic particles within atoms, molecules, cells, organisms, and all the way up and all the way down. Of course, we're in the middle somewhere. We're made up of smaller, creative, intelligent realities like our microbiome, and we're part of larger, creative, intelligent realities that we utterly depend upon. And so it's obviously more complex than this. But primary reality, by primary reality, I mean everything inside us and everything outside us that we don't exist without. It's primary. We're derivative. We're dependent. Martin Buber, the famous Jewish theologian, said, if we don't have an I-thou relationship, that is a respectful, honorable, personal relationship to reality, we'll cause our own extinction. And that's what we've been doing. We've been basically treating the living world, the universe, as a complex clock. And God is the clockmaker outside the universe. And if you believe in the clockmaker, you're a theist. And if you disbelieve in the clockmaker, you're an atheist. And both sides treat the biosphere as an it, not a thou. And all indigenous cultures had what I call an eco-theo worldview. That is, the ecos was related to as divine, and the theos, the world of spirit, was infused, embodied within the living world. Gaia would be good enough, except if you have a concept of God that is your ultimate authority that's outside Gaia, and then it's not enough. So that's why I've begun spelling God. G